Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for holding this hearing. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. I want to start with the COVID Origins Act, which Senator Paul mentioned a second ago, and which I think is such a great case study in the failure of the federal government, the executive branch, to even comply with the law. I mean, forget being responsive to FOIA requests, although we'll get to that in just a second, but just to comply with the law. Mr. Ruskin, you highlighted in your written testimony that it was 1 year ago today, I think, that the president signed into law the COVID Origins Act, which, as Senator Paul pointed out, we passed unanimously here in the Senate. It passed in the House pretty close to unanimously. It passed on suspension. So that was a year ago. The administration under the law, and by the way, you can read the law. It's very short. I wrote it. It is not an optional command. It is mandatory. It is, as lawyers say, precatory. It is you shall. They shall declassify any and all information relating to potential links between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and the origin of COVID. So, finally, late on June 23rd, they blew through the statutory deadline. The statute sets a deadline, as you remember, Mr. Ruskin. There's a deadline in the statute. The administration blew right through that deadline. And then late, in violation of the statutory deadline, they don't produce any and all information related to potential links. They give us a 5-page summary of information, which is in total violation of the statute, and then a cover page, so that's important, and then an appendix, which sheds no light on anything, for a grand total, I think, of 10 pages. I mean, it's a joke. It's a total joke. I immediately wrote to ODNI, Director of National Intelligence, and said, you're in violation of this statute. Do you want to try again, actually comply? Or maybe you'd like to come testify to this committee. I don't think that was a year ago. I sent that on June 27th of last year. I just checked again this morning. I don't think I've ever gotten a response to that letter. I mean, it's basically the FU from ODNI. They don't care. They violated the statute openly. They don't even respond. They don't even bother to respond to the letters. They don't care. Now, you, Mr. Ruskin, you, I think, have filed a FOIA request for the same information. Is that right?
Yeah, we filed the FOIA request, and we filed FOIA litigation for it 7 months ago, and all we've gotten is the unclassified report.
Yeah. So, okay, you filed a FOIA request, and so far you've gotten zilch. Is that correct?
Yeah, with the litigation.
And then you went to court because they weren't complying with the FOIA request, and that was in August, I think, is when you went to court. Is that right?
Yeah,
August of last year.
I think so. 7 months ago.
Yeah, August 10th, I think, of last year. And thus far, ODNI has, or any other, for that matter, arm of the federal government, they haven't engaged, they haven't complied, they've given you nothing other than their original report, which is flagrantly in violation of the law. Have I got that right?
You got that right.
I mean, this is just, I can't emphasize how absurd this is and what a mockery this makes of federal law, what a mockery it makes of oversight, and frankly, what disrespect it is for the American people. I mean, the reason that the president signed this into law, I'm sure he didn't want to, but the reason he did, and the reason it passed so overwhelmingly in both houses is the American people want to know what their government knows about the origins of COVID. And they have a right to know. As Senator Paul pointed out, much of this is declassified anyway, and yet they still will not make it available for public review. And despite the law, despite Congress, both houses of Congress and the president signing a law, they still won't comply. So let me just ask you this. I mean, in terms of next steps, what would you recommend, Mr. Ruskin? What do you think this Congress can do, this committee, Congress, can do to compel agencies to comply with federal law? Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I mean, I think oversight hearings like this are crucial, and, you've got to do a lot more of them, and just, fight for the ability, on behalf of the American people, to make sure that we all can read the documents that our federal government produces.
Do you think there ought to be penalties for federal agencies that fail to produce records that are required by statute?
I definitely think there ought to be, and I also think there could be some extra funding for agencies that do a good job at it.
Do you have any other suggestions for improving the system to get agencies to produce records? I mean, I've been rebuffed multiple times. You've been rebuffed multiple times. Senator Paul's been, everybody sitting in this committee has been stonewalled by, if not this administration, other administrations. Do you have any other suggestions for steps that we can take? Penalties, anything else?
I mean, it's not a specific suggestion, but this is a co-equal branch of government, and it's important for our members of Congress to act like that.
Yeah, that's good advice, and we do need to start acting like it. Well, I thank you, Mr. Ruskin, for what you do. I thank you for the litigation you carry out on behalf of the public's right to know. In this case, just to comply with federal law. I mean, here the law actually requires the disclosure, and we're getting absolutely nothing. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for holding this hearing. I would just humbly submit that I think maybe it's time to call the Director of National Intelligence and any others and have an oversight hearing about their total failure to comply with a law that we passed unanimously out of the Senate, and that the House passed overwhelmingly, and the President signed into law, and they've made zero effort to comply with it in any meaningful way. Thanks to the witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.